A Local History of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in the Hull and Grimsby Area, 1844 to 1973. This is audio transcript, 6 of 9, Year History, 1938 to 1956. The audio transcripts were compiled by Sharon Bolton and produced by Michael Pennington. The audio transcripts of this history are available in audio CD, MP3 and Windows Media Player formats. In order to obtain copies of these audio transcripts, or print versions of this history, available in Microsoft Word and Adobe PDF formats, please contact Sharon Bolton by email, at sharonmbolton@gmail.com. Year History 1938. On January 11, the missionaries took a lantern lecture, down pioneer trails to show to about 80 scouts and guides at Princess Avenue Methodist Church. On the 23rd, Richard Lyman of the European Mission spoke in the evening service. More than 125 people attended. Joseph Walker, Grimsby branch president, conducted. There was also a baptism of 2 Grimsby people in the afternoon. In February the annual Gold and Green Ball was held. The Queen of the Ball, Dorothy Mearns, was crowned by the American consul, Mr. Ilo C. Funk. Also present were Florence Marmburg, Mission YWMIA president, and Helen Bryant, the district president for young women. Hull Conference was held on April 10, with President Hugh B. Brown of the British Mission presiding. Hull Conference President and Joseph J. Walker conducted. Speakers included Sister Marmburg and Marion Barrett. In June, Charles W. Hales was appointed supervising elder of the Hull Conference. In August, Daniel G. Heaton was named district supervising elder. In April, the Hull branch M. Menglina Baseball Clubs sponsored an April Fool's Dance in St. Columba's Dance Hall. Over 200 people attended. In May, Marion Barrett organized a May Festival, with Nancy Ram as May Queen, attended by Elsie Spain and Milo England. In August, the MIA had a day out to Hornsea by bus and cycle, while the Relief Society went to Cleethorpes later in the month. In October, 7 people were baptized at a special service in the Hull Chapel. 1939. In January, an address on the history and principles of Mormonism was given by the supervising elder, Elder William G. Woffinden, before the Newland branch. In February, the Gold and Green Ball was held, with approximately 50 in attendance. Elder Woffinden's lecture was also repeated at the Newland Social Club, on February 14. In April, the Hull Annual Conference was held, with Hugh B. Brown again presiding, and Elder Matheson conducting the meetings. Attendance was 155, half of whom were non-members. War broke out in September, and just before this, all missionaries were withdrawn from the mission, leaving the branches to themselves. For the next 6 to 7 years, the units were run mainly by sisters with a few local elders. Arthur Ransom, who was serving as district and branch president in Hull, was taken away by war work, and George Utley carried on as branch president. Sister Marion Barrett was primary mother, taking in many local children of the neighborhood. 1940. In September, the semi-annual conference was held, with 3 sessions conducted by Arthur Ransom as district president, the mission president, A.K. Anastasio, of whom was the concluding speaker. The attendance was 37. 1941. In May, the Hull Chapel suffered slight damage from an air raid, with bombs falling on 3 sides, blowing out most of the windows and damaging ceilings in 2 small rooms. Conference was held in July, with President Anastasio and his wife present, and sessions conducted by Eric Thorpe, counselor in the district presidency. Attendance was 42. A week later, President Arthur Ransom was released, and Eric Thorpe sustained as district president, with Arthur Ransom as counselor. A meeting was also held for missionaries. These would be all local members, mainly sisters. A social was held in July to raise funds for missionary work, and in August there were 2 baptisms. 1942. In July, the Hull Branch Relief Society held a social in the Recreation Hall. Attendance was 42. In August, the branch conference was held. Robert H. Summers was branch president. The concluding speaker was Elder Simser, who was serving in the U.S. Army. The attendance was 19. Hull District Conference was held on August 8th and 9th in Thrift Hall, Grimsby, with President and Sister Anastasia, and Eric Thorpe as District President. On Saturday, there was a presentation including records of the Tabernacle Choir, and a 1-act play on conversion. The first session on Sunday was on a fast and testimony meeting, followed by a report session and a second session in the afternoon, including a separation into priesthood and relief society. Attendance was 13 priesthood, and 21 relief society, and 60 to 65 attended the evening session. There was a baptism in September, of one brother, Alan F. Smith, baptized by Bernard Hall, the Grimsby branch president. Hull branch held a harvest festival on October the 23rd. The branch president Robert H. Summers gave an address, from the Book of Ruth. The produce from the festival was taken to the Victoria Hospital for the sick children. 1943. A Hull District Priesthood Convocation was held on April 3 in Thrift Hall, Grimsby, with President Anastasia and his councillor, George H. Bailey. There were 4 sessions over 2 days, with an average attendance of 14. The main address was on home missionary work. On May 20th, Robert H. Summers was released as branch president, and was succeeded by Ralph Mount, with Elder Summers as councillor. Mary Ransom was Sunday school superintendent, with Elsie Spain and Annie Rogers as councillors. On Tuesday the 20th July, Sister Julie Foster, as members of the Hull branch, contributed £1,000 towards the building of an endowment house or temple in the British Mission. Her letter was sent to the First Presidency with the request. July 24th and the 25th was Hull Conference, held again at Thrift Hall, Grimsby. President Anastasia met with 9 local leaders first, then with 36 members and friends in a social evening. The first session on Sunday was Sacrament and Testimonies. 25 attended. The second session included a Sunday school presentation on 7 keys to eternal progression, and talks on salvation for the living and the dead, by Sister Missionary Gladys Griffith and President Anastasia. 1944. No conference was reported. In Hull branch, Elsie Spain was appointed Sunday school superintendent with Nancy Ram and Marion Barrett as assistants. On July 25th, there was a wedding, when Ralph Mount married Annie Ram, with President Bailey officiating. 1945. There were no entries for this year. 1946. Early in the year, missionaries began returning. A couple, William and Esther Thornton, came to labor in the Hull district. In Hull, the MIA held a reunion social in February, and in March the Sunday school organized a party, including a pantomime, Sleeping Beauty. Sister Thornton was one of their guests. In April, Harry Oxley was sustained as MIA president. In September, the Sunday school superintendency was changed, Elsie Spain being released and Vera Thistleton sustained. District Conference was held in December, in Hull Chapel, with President Almerson and his wife, President and Sister Boyer, and William Thornton as the main speakers. The average attendance at all sessions was 14. In August, Elder Melvin M. Owens arrived to take responsibility as district president, with the task of putting the 2 active branches of Hull and Grimsby back on their feet. 1947. In January, under the direction of the district president, the Gainsborough branch was reopened. Missionary elders continued to arrive slowly. In March, Elder Blair Maxfield and Francis Cammack arrived. Elder Cammack was sustained as Hull branch president at the end of the month. Elder Owens, released as district president on transfer to mission office. was succeeded by Elder Don C. Wood. 3 more missionaries arrived in April. Elder Hopkin to Grimsby and Elders Platt and Maxfield to Hull. In May, the entire complement of 8 elders, with 22 others, held a farewell tea in honor of Jean Garnett of Grimsby, who was going to Denver, Colorado, to be married. The annual Gold and Green Ball was held in Hull in April. Mary Kingswood was chosen as queen, and was crowned by President Alma's son. Hull branch was reorganized in May. Amelia Ransom being released as Relief Society president, and Gertrude Allison sustained in her stead. Vera Thistleton was released as Sunday school superintendent and Elder Blair Maxfield sustained. Helen Bryant was released as YWMIA president, and Hilda Twydale sustained. The following Sunday school was timed to start at 10:30 instead of the afternoon as it had been throughout the war years. Hull Branch Conference was held on June 29, with District President Don C. Wood presiding and Branch President Elwin F. Cammack conducting. In August, Hull Branch Sunday School had an outing for 21 children to Hessel by bus. Also in August, Grimsby Branch MIA had organized cycle rides to Lincoln, Lace B, and Hubbard's Hills. District Conference was held in Thrift Hall, Grimsby in October. Presiding was President Boyer. Hull District President was Arthur V. Nettleship. Later in the month, the Leeds, Newcastle and Hull districts held their Sunday School convention in Hull. The Rakes Sunday School was portrayed and a model lesson was presented by Marion Barrett. 1948. Many contacts were now being made by the missionaries in the Hull district. In January, Elders Rigby and Parkinson moved from Gainsborough branch to Scarborough, where a new branch was to be organized. In May, President Colin Gunn Mackay and Bircher Lee Hopkin undertook to locate members in Scunthorpe. They located all but one, and anticipated starting a home Sunday school there. In August, permission was finally secured to hold open-air meetings in Hull and Scarborough. In Hull, they were held every day at noon, weather permitting, and in the evenings when the elders had no cottage meetings. Elders Rigby and Hopwell held them in Scarborough on Wednesdays and Sundays. On Sundays, they were held on the pier in Hull. In March, Elder Wilford presented the gospel message to members of Hull YPI, which was well received, opening friends' homes for further teaching. In May, President Cammack presented a lantern lecture in the top of the mountains at the Hull chapter. Hull District Conference was held on April 17 to the 18th, with President and Sister Boyer. The Saturday saw 80 members and friends attend a social evening, with games and dances and musical items. The district MIA Queen, Melba J. Guest, was chosen, and crowned by Sister Boyer. On July 3, a district union meeting was held, when Mavis Oxley was sustained as district Sunday school assistant. The district president, Colin G. Mackay, presided. He and Elder Fred Mason were spending at least one day a month tracting and holding open-air meetings with each pair of elders. Activities in Hull Branch were extended and varied. Mother's Day was held on March 7. Arthur Ransom was sustained branch president on April 18. Primary conference was held on May 2, with 47 children, most of them being non-members. An MIA social, as a gramophone concert, was organized by Brother Kennington on May 25. 3 other socials were organized. One on July 27, to say farewell to Helen Bryant, who was emigrating, a bank holiday outing to East Park, and a Wiener roast in Little Switzerland at Hessel. Hull District Conference was held on October 3, with President and Sister Boyer and President Poole. Also present were Elder Archibald F. Bennett, and Elder James M. Black of the Church Genealogical Society. On December 10, Elder Alan M. Swan was appointed District President, and on December 18, Vera Thistleton was appointed Genealogical Chairman of the Hull Branch. 1949. On January 28, a social was held in Hull Branch to raise funds for the Gold and Green Ball to be held in February. 3 days later, a farewell social was held for Arthur Ransom and his wife, who were emigrating. Elder Parry was appointed branch president in his stead. At the Gold and Green Ball, John C. Kennington was MC, and Mary Fellens of Scunthorpe branch was crowned queen. Hull District Conference was held on March 27, with Savoy J. Boyer presiding. The morning session was taken by the Sunday School, and about 40 children took part in the program. The average attendance at each session was 80. The semi-annual conference was held on September 4, when the average attendance was 82. President Boyer was the main speaker at all sessions. 2 elders arrived in July into the district: Chad J. Flake from Arizona and Elliot D. Roberts from Texas. 1950. A social was held in January to say farewell to President and Sister Boyer, organized by Hull Branch MIA. A play, Potluck, was shown. Elder Swan gave a piano solo, Vera Thistleton a monologue, and Brother Utley a character study in mime. In March another farewell party was held for Elder Parry and the Utley family who were emigrating. The branch president, John C. Kennington, presented gifts to them, and Olive Guest gave the children gifts from the Sunday School. Hull District Conference was held on April 2, preceded by a social evening, at which the new mission president, Steno Richards, and his wife were guests. At the first conference session, the Priesthood and Relief Society met separately, and the children's program from Sunday School was given in the afternoon. Musical numbers were given by the Grimsby Chorus and Hull Branch Singing Mothers. The main speakers were President Richards, Elder Ross M. Ballard, and President Swan. There was much missionary movement during the year, with each elder leaving an impression on the district. In January, Elder Ernest R. Hedman arrived. In February, William Thornton and Frederick Haywood. In May, Claire F. Wyatt arrived. Elder Haywood went to Sheffield in May, and in June, Elder Wheeler and the district president Alan M. Swan returned home. In July, D. E. Hipwell and Ralph C. Wheeler returned home, and Elliot D. Roberts became Hull district president. Later in the month, Robert H. Hales and Richard T. Rowley arrived, and Horace Coltrane transferred from Liverpool. Charles T. Bradbury transferred to Bristol, with Edmund McClure. In September, Claude M. Dewsnup transferred from Sheffield, and William Thornton from Welsh to Hull. Robert P. Romney and Calvin J. Weeks also arrived, and in October, Norman G. Ainscoe and Wayne M. Webster were released. Social activities continued to increase, with a dinner and concert in Grimsby in May, a social in the Roscoe Rooms, the regular meeting place in Scarborough where 25 attended, led by Elders Flake and Ainscoe, and a mystery tour in July, marking the 2nd anniversary of the opening of the branch. 50 saints and friends went on the coach. In Grimsby, the saints met in Migga House, where another social was held when Elder Hipwell, who was branch president, departed. District President, Elder Swan, made a presentation to him on behalf on the branch. York branch was still very small, but they met in the Co-op Hall in Rugia Street. Welfare was much in mind in Hull. The brethren had a plot of land on which they grew various vegetables, which the sisters then sold to provide funds, or passed them on to needy people. The MIA held a summer festival, and the sports program being on July 22. It began with a baseball game, followed by races and various other events. The arts program was held in August, when entries in the poem and essay divisions were presented. 3 branches took part in these events: Hull, who won, Grimsby and Scarborough. 1951. Very little was reported during the year. David O. Mackay became president of the church. In Scarborough, the Reynolds family were baptized in April. Edward Reynolds was made branch president about a year later, and served 3 times as such until he was called on the High Council, then as state patriarch, then on a temple mission in 1984. His son, Michael, served a mission, then after marriage, moved to Huddersfield, where he was on the bishopric, later to become a full-time worker in church headquarters in Solihull, in the finance department. In York, at least baptisms took place, including Leslie Winard, who later served on the district council. 1952. The mission president, Steno Richards, was called as an assistant to the 12, so in August he was released and Hammeraiser became mission president. In August also Gerald R. Auber became Hull branch president. Robert P. Romney was released as district president, being succeeded by Richard Henninger in November. In January Marion G. Romney was sustained as an apostle. On August bank holiday, the MIA Summer Festival was held again on the Beresford Avenue playing fields in Hull. Later, York branch had an outing to Filey, organized by Brother Wilfred Roberts. 1953. In Hull, one missionary served as counselor to the branch president. But in January, Robert B. Thistleton, a priest, was called as counselor to President Aubrey. He was then called to serve as a local missionary with James E. Holmes. Two sisters, Frida Stevens and Marion Rose, were also called. These callings were for approximately 6 months. In June, Frida Stevens was called as primary mother in Hull branch. The district conference was held in April, preceded by a social evening on the Saturday with turns from Hull, York, and Scarborough. At the fall conference in September, Richard Henninger was released as district president and elder tag sustained. Grimsby branch was still growing, although they do not feature in the news, except that during the year, they moved from their present rooms to a large converted house called Friargate, which was located in Cartergate in the town. General church statistics at the end of 1952 showed a total church population of 1,189,053, with 2,897 full-time missionaries. 1954. New Year's Eve in York was celebrated with a supper in the home of Reginald Turver, who had been baptized just a year before. He was later to be called to work in the branches, then as a high counselor, and then as state patriarch. From February to May, Elder Louis Cook was the district president and was succeeded by George Durant, who held that office until December 1955. In January, the organization of elders' quorums was authorized. There was much social activity throughout the district, each unit holding 2 meetings per month at least. In Scarborough, some of these were held at Gran Barker's home, where saints and friends enjoyed themselves. In Hull, one big success was McNamara's band, in which the musicians played the washboard, buzzcones, and bazookas as instruments. Another successful venture was a potted version of A Midsummer Night's Dream, starring the elders. In the summer, a garden party was held at Brother Spur's home with games and a treasure hunt. Many of these activities in Hull were in aid of the building fund, as there was a plan to extend the building. The chapel in Wellington Lane was showing signs of subsidence, possibly a result of war damage, and also caused in part by some trees which were then removed. Other fundraising activities were carried out, mainly from the sale of homemade toys, canned goods, firewood and surplus clothing, some of which was sold from a market stall on Saturday for welfare funds. Hull branch was expanding, with many members living in Bilton Grange, which was nearly 5 miles from the chapel. So in the summer a home Sunday school was organized, at the home of James F. Stone. Numbers grew so rapidly, that in September the school at Bilton Grange was hired for Sunday school, with Brother Stone in charge. In May, Hull branch had a visit from Brother Victor Palmer, the mission scoutmaster, to help organize a scout troop. The local Baden-Powell scouting authorities were approached, and the boys, with help, constructed window guards so they could use the hall and gardens for ball games. Kenneth Wilson was appointed scoutmaster, and at branch conference he was replaced by John Westerman. A scout committee was formed, which became very active, raising funds for the growing troop. 1955. In January, the organization of elders' quorums in the British Mission was authorized. Hull, Leeds and Sheffield districts to form the second quorum. So in June, at district conferences, this took place, with George Laycock as president, and Arthur Jenner, of Grimsby branch, as councillor. In July, President Spencer W. Kimball, a member of the Quorum of 12, and European president, visited the district. He held special meetings in Hull, with the mission president, Hamer Ryder and others. In Grimsby he dedicated their chapel, Friar Gate. He also met Brother Herbert Hall, who had been branch president during the war, and who remembered the branch as it used to be, meeting in Thrift Hall for over 40 years. Also in July, Scarborough branch moved into their new premises at 5 Prospect Road, another converted building, with the chapel upstairs. York branch was also refurbishing their building, which was a converted house on Holgate Hill. August was a very eventful month. Clifton Kerr succeeded Hamer Ryder as the mission president. The New York chapel was opened and there was an attendance of 50. There was another successful garden party at the Spurs home, and then near the end of the month, a party set off for London to attend the groundbreaking ceremony for the London Temple. This was followed the next day, by a concert in the Royal Albert Hall with the Tabernacle Choir. Social events in Hull and other units occurred fortnightly. The main ones in Hull were a gypsy operetta in June, which was produced by Marion Barrett, with Leslie Stone as the Gypsy Queen. A Halloween party in October was organized by Jack Spur and Fred Oakley. Then in December, a pantomime, Snow White, was produced by Vera Thistleton and Pat Stevens. The year ended in Hull with a banquet on New Year's Eve, with President Aubrey heading the guest list. Other changes in the district during the year were the release of Elder Durant as district president, in November, and the appointment of Elder Bruce Robinson in his stead. The release of Elder Pitcher as Grimsby branch president, and the sustaining of Arthur Jenner in his stead, with Howard Lloyd as councillor and Leslie Bushell as branch clerk. 1956. The number of missionaries serving in the district was growing considerably, and the calling of missionaries from England was also growing. Mary Walker, who spent part of her mission in Hull and in Scarborough, was a native of Halifax. In April, 1956, a sister, Francesca Lorna Wilcox, was sent on her mission from York branch to London. In the district, baptisms were taking place nearly every week, many of them in Hull, as that was the location of the only baptismal font in the area. Others took place in the public baths in York and Grimsby. In June, Scunthorpe branch was opened, with Elder Lindart as branch president. They met in rooms in the town. One of their first branch activities was a tour of the steel mill, where some of the members worked. In September, the Sunday school held in East Hull was expanded to a dependent branch, holding its own sacrament meeting, in Grange School. The saints there began to look ahead, when they would have their own premises as elsewhere, and great efforts were made at raising building funds. Socials and dances were held, with modern, old-time and square dancing, and a wide variety of games and turns. One of these was a telepathy act, by Robert Thistleton and Michael Bamfield. Other fundraising events included a Cub Gang show by the Hull Cub Pack, led by Madge Wilkinson and Mary Stevens. A Halloween play, written and produced by Doris Scott, and a magic show given by George Dandely, as part of a Christmas show, which centered on the Pied Piper. Other activities included an outing of the older children from Hull to York, which included activities in the York Chapel and a walk round the city walls, which was led by James E. Holmes and Jack Spur. In September, a farewell social was held in York for the district president, Elder Robinson, conducted by the York branch president, Wilfred Roberts. The new district president was Elder Penrose. In August, 2 football teams, from Scarborough and York, met at Eastfield, near Scarborough, for an out-of-season game. Then at the end of the month, there was a very special visitor, Apostle Adam S. Benyon, came to Hull, who spoke on the O's of Mormonism, origin, organization, obligation, opportunity, and outcome. There was also an outing from the district, to the Leeds district, meeting in Roundhay Park, Leeds, That concludes audio transcript 6 of 9, of a local history of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in the Hull and Grimsby area, 1844 to 1973.